Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and we are joined by WAM contributor Tim Picciott of the Liberty Advisor. Again, thanks for joining us, Tim.
Thank you for having me, Josh.
All right, now let's get to something that is in the headlines today, because obviously the Federal Reserve is lowering interest rates. I think they're probably going to go negative in the near future. But one thing that stands out is that Donald Trump has increased these tariffs on China. And I want to just take a bit from this article called "Bank of America: What Trump Did is a Game Changer" by Zero Hedge, where they mention, as Bank of America team of economists write, Trump's latest tariff announcement from last Thursday, when the president shockingly unveiled 10% tariffs on $300 billion in Chinese imports starting September 1st, is a major escalation. This means that the consumer, which has been the bright spot in the recovery, could be hit. Now, it's interesting because Bank of America is actually saying something that is correct, economically correct, accurate. I want to go to Tim for this, but it shows a chart here, adverse feedback loop between the Fed and trade policy, and it shows more tariffs goes to economy, market weakens, then to Fed eases, then to economy, market strengthens, and back to more tariffs. And this is interesting because, you take this and you add it to what JP Morgan recently said about, getting out of cash as much as you can and getting into gold. It seems the banks are trying to cover their own tracks by being accurate at the end of this crisis. These banks that are completely bankrupt, according to their own cash to deposit ratio. Tim, what do you think about this feedback loop and the effect that Trump's tariffs have on the economy, possibly leading to, more interest rates being dropped out?
I think this feedback loop is absolutely spot on. I mean, I don't know how more people can't see it. And, if you take things back a step further, I mean, I originally had a presentation called The Trump Effect and Why Good News is Bad News. And the entire premise was that, all the good news, relative to Hillary Clinton would, end up making the stock market go up. Then having the stock market go up would then have the Federal Reserve losing excuses to not cut rates. And that's exactly what we've seen, except eventually, when we're on this, what was it, October 3rd, Jerome Powell said we're on autopilot, or October 4th, and that, quantitative tightening was also on a path where it was just going to keep going on and on and on. Well, that has just been stopped as of last week. And then it looks like now the trajectory, even though they say that, we're not on a path downward, I mean, I think the obvious path right now, I mean, I know the bond market is expecting, close to maybe even 3 more rate cuts this year. And I think eventually we will be back at zero, because this is an entire economy built on debt, built on a house of cards. And so if the debt is not expanding, then that means that the economy is not expanding, even though, what ends up happening, look at the actual net worth. And what drives me crazy, that the government is just, the deficit is just going through the roof right now. We're going to be over $1 trillion this year, probably about, close to 1.1, depending on if you're counting fiscal or calendar year. Mm-hmm. And most Republicans think that this is absolutely great that we're spending all this money, because they only care about the little incremental GDP gains. And the GDP gains are not even that much more than what Obama was doing. But what Trump knows right now is that he has basically staked his entire reputation and presidency on the Dow Jones and the S&P 500, because I believe the number is there's an 86% chance that the 2 months prior to an election, if the market's up, then the incumbent is going to win. And so Trump knows this. And so right now, what I think he's trying to do, and I mentioned this on a video I did back in March, where I think he is trying to force a rate cut by talking up all these tariffs even more. Because, I mean, at this point, he's even got to know that these tariffs are even a bad idea. I mean, I'll even give him, benefit of the doubt. But I think that now that he creates this additional uncertainty, this additional, turbulence in the market, and then now you increase the chance of another Fed rate cut, which is what he wants. And so I think he's trying to game things to have, there's all these up and down cycles. I mean, right now, if you go back to January, I think 2018, the Dow Jones was pretty close to 27,000. And then we went down a lot, then back up, then down a lot, then back up. And now we're at the, one of those up phases. And so I think he wants to time these up and down phases to have an up phase, when he's elected. But if you take a look at the actual numbers of how much the stock market's gained since he's been elected, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's past the 10% historical average. And so you got to be really careful if you're a Republican out there trying to tout yourself, hanging your hat and all these BS numbers, because a lot of these BS numbers are not better than Obama's BS numbers. When you take a look at the percentage gains, like, okay, great. You took unemployment, I'm just guessing right now, like, okay, from 4.2 down to 3.7. Okay, well, if that's what you want to hang your hat on, Obama technically took it from, I don't know, pretty much double digits down to 4.2. And everyone knows who knows me that I cannot stand Obama. I mean, I wrote a little booklet on how to dispel a lot of this stuff, but no, this feedback loop, absolutely spot on. And so right now Trump feels emboldened that he can do this, because he doesn't feel emboldened when the market was down at, closer to 22,000, didn't feel very emboldened then. And so now he just wants to create a scapegoat in the Federal Reserve, even though the whole reason the Fed had to cut rates is because he was touting things up as the greatest economy ever. So in many respects, he's really shooting himself in the foot every time he talks things up, because then decreases that chance of a further rate cut.
Well, this is always having to do with the central planners trying to cure the woes of central planning with central planning. It's a Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution, repeat for eternity. And I guess there's that saying, that little known saying called the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again, expecting different results. And that's essentially what this feedback loop is. And they're trying to paper over an already destroyed economy. I mean, it's never really recovered after 2008. By the numbers, by the charts, it looks like it has, but it's all papered over with vast amounts of debt and nonsense. And Tim, I mean, one of the major things I hear from people when I talk about the tariffs is that, oh, well, he's doing what's best for the country, and China has been giving us a raw deal for all these years. And it's like, yeah, they have been, but how is government going to save us from government? I mean, what caused China to be giving us such a raw deal over all these years? Well, let's see. I mean, look at the establishment of this allyship with the Chinese going back to the 1970s under Kissinger and then Zbigniew Brzezinski and the Trilateral Commission. It's all been propped up by the U.S. government in the first place, and it reminds me of so many wars. It's like, the U.S. arms and funds the Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, then shoots himself in the foot in the Gulf of Tonkin on purpose and causes a war. Arms and funds the Iraqis and goes to war with Iraq, props up Hitler against a communist, then props up the Soviets against Hitler, and then props up the Mujahideen, aka Al-Qaeda, against the USSR. It seems like they always just create the problem and come in as a solution. For those that are saying, what we're seeing is just Trump getting back at China for all these terrible things with these, he's pushing these socialist policies for the greater good of the greater number, I guess, that collectivist mantra. What do you say to people, and why do these hurt people more than they help people?
I mean, I think Doug Casey actually said it best, is that having a tariff is a self-imposed embargo on yourself. And I thought that was one of the best analogies I've ever heard as it relates to that. But then take a look at who's actually getting the raw end of the deal. So if right now, if you're China, I mean, they're selling us all their cheap crap, a lot cheaper than what we can make it for right now. And so the American consumer then benefits from being able to buy all that cheap crap. But what does China get in return? They get IOUs, they get treasury debts, and treasury notes is what they're pouring their money back into. So we're giving them fake BS monopoly money that's not even real money, that's basically digits on a computer screen, and they're giving us actual real goods. And so if you take a look at who's actually in the driver's seat and probably getting a better deal, okay, we just go like this, okay, type up some digits on a computer screen, and then we go buy a bunch of your crap. Well, you're getting zeros on a computer screen, and we're getting real stuff. So even though the real stuff might be crap, it's still actual real stuff. And so I would actually say that China is actually getting the worst end of the deal, and that if you have a bankrupt customer like the United States, the best thing to do is to, at least nip it in the bud. And obviously we're way past that. And the other thing that I always hear people say is that, well, China could never do anything to our debt because, they would shoot themselves in the foot if they would ever sell off our debt. Well, a lot of the debt that we're selling right now are very short-term bonds, like 2-3 year debts. So China, they don't have to, all they have to do is maybe not buy any new debt for 5 years or 3 years. Probably after 2 years, probably most of it would be rolled off the books, and the Fed would, at that point, would then have to monetize that, which, I like to call him Osama Ben Bernanke, said that we would not be monetizing the debt back when he was, heading that regime. But yeah, no, it's just absolutely crazy that people just don't have this, bigger understanding. But it was the globalists and the Americans who, helped set China up. I mean, I believe you mentioned Kissinger. I think Kissinger, helped put Mao into place, and basically, praised Mao about how great he was, even though he is basically one of the biggest mass murderers, or not potentially the biggest mass murderer in modern history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, government's good at murdering people and screwing people and pushing them into slavery. And I wanted to then, I agree with you 100%, but what do you say to those that are like, well, what about all the new factory jobs that are coming to the United States? I mean, it seems to be working in some ways. What do you think?
I mean, I think there was a recent manufacturing number that just came out right now. I forgot which Fed branch put it out, but I believe it was down to like 2009 levels of the manufacturing output. So there was a temporary little boost that we did get. I mean, so when you have, absolutely atrocious numbers and then you get a little bit better number, then yeah, it makes things look better. But the analogy that I like to use is that in 2016, I mean, with Obama, then with, the look like it was going into Hillary, it's like we were basically a patient where every limb was cut off. We're gushing out blood out of every orifice, and then we've got an 800-pound gorilla with a sledgehammer. Okay, great. Maybe we remove the sledgehammer. Now we have a 300-pound gorilla on there, and maybe now that gorilla is trying to, bandage this up. But what they're doing is they're arguing over, oh, should we have a beige color banana or a Band-Aid, or should we have a red one, or should we do this? Like, it doesn't matter. The guy is on the ground, dying, bleeding out of every orifice, and we're arguing over the most minute details. Okay, great. Yeah, greatest economy ever, and we've got over $1 trillion in debt. The only reason it's the greatest economy ever is because the stock market's high. Well, the reason the stock market is high is because the Federal Reserve has lowered rates, and then the trajectory is that they're going to keep on lowering rates. And so it's this easy money where they're forcing people into these risk assets. But for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. But what they know is they can't allow deflation to occur because the entire monetary supply would basically collapse. I'd recommend Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money Part 4, people that don't know what I'm talking about in that regard. And so they want to have inflation. They say that the biggest problem right now is there's not enough inflation, aka the biggest problem the Federal Reserve has right now is that they're not eroding your purchasing power. Stealing your purchasing power fast enough is the biggest problem. And that's where I think there's such an opportunity to reach out to leftists and where, there's probably a lot that we agree with them on from the standpoint of, yeah, I agree with you, you're getting screwed. I agree with you that, you can't keep with the cost of living. But the reason is not because you're not getting paid enough. Yeah, that would be, nice. That would be attacking the symptom. But the real reason is because the central bankers get the money first. They give it out to all their rich friends. They buy up all the financial assets. And now, you're stuck, having, everything you buy costs, 150, 200% more than it did a decade and a half ago. But yet, your income is up maybe 20, 30%. And so there's a big imbalance. This can't go on forever. They can paper things over. Frankly, I'm sort of surprised that we've been able to paper things over as long as we have. But yeah, no, we've got this whole feedback loop right now where Donald Trump thinks that feels really emboldened because now he got what he wanted. He knows that the Federal Reserve is going to keep lowering rates. And the best way to ensure that they're going to keep lowering rates is to F things up again and to create more uncertainty in the economy. So then that way he can then force another rate hike. And I wouldn't be surprised if the rates, by the time, I don't think the Fed's going to really want to help them out too much, but I wouldn't be surprised if the rate's closer to 1% by the time the election rolls around. If a Democrat was in there, I think it'd already be back down to 0 because of different types of political games. And just as people know, I'm politically agnostic, more libertarian voluntarist. I hate both the sides, but just trying to call it out from a pure geopolitical sense of
I mean, looking at the charts and everything, I mean, it's all been papered over, but we could also say that Obama saved the economy just like we could say Trump saved the economy. I mean, if you look at the numbers going from 2008, it's just up all the way, and people will cut out the portion of Obama and just be like, look how much has gone up since Trump's been in office. And it's like, okay, by that same logic, it's BS both ways, but by that same logic, we can say that Obama saved the economy. It's nonsense. And I would have to say, like inflation, all these problems, the hidden tax of inflation, we're seeing homelessness skyrocket. We're seeing with these tariffs, we're seeing a lot of cases of major U.S. chains looking for solace of some kind in places like China. And I remember there's a farm bill a while back ago. So a lot of farmers needed to be bailed out from these problems. Again, the symptom and then coming in as a solution with the same problem. But they went to bail out all these farmers. Well, it turns out what farmers got the bailout? Well, major factory farms, the mom and pop farms were not getting bailed out and continued to lose money.
The Monsanto-backed ones, which I guess now is Bayer, which from the Nazis and Ivy Farben. So great match in heaven with those two.
Yeah, talk about subsidized, but it's just ridiculous. It's just government propped up on government, and when the solution comes down to it comes down to individuals like you. You are the change you wish to see. You protect yourself. You protect your wealth. You are the one that's in charge of your own destiny, not these government government officials that create the problem come in as the solution to the same problem they just created. It's insanity. It truly is the definition of insanity over and over and over again. So with that said, when we're seeing all this poverty, when we're seeing the hidden tax inflation, people are working half the time for the state. So half your week, half your year is literally being a slave on a farm to pay these bureaucrats to go prop up fake numbers like the jobs numbers in the labor force participation rate hidden within. All complete nonsense. The numbers are fudged. And Tim, finally, I'm closing this off. I mean, what are the chances that we will see rates go negative as we continue to see all this vast centralization happening?
Well, whether or not they go negative or not, I think it's really immaterial because the real rate is going to be negative. And as we mentioned probably in the previous video, when you take a look at the inflation rates, if the real inflation rate is really, let's say 6, 7, 8, 9%, and you can get a bond that's paying 1% from the government or 2% from the government, you're really losing 8% of your purchasing power, or 7% of your purchasing power. And so that's where the real losses are going to occur. That you're going to see a lot of retirees who want to be safe. They're going to want to put 40% of their money in bonds because that's what their financial advisor told them to do. Well, that whole 40% of their portfolio is basically going to be complete dead weight. And same thing with the pension funds. I mean, about 40-50% of those portfolios are going to be dead weight, in bonds, earning next to nothing. And then it's riding everything on the stock market. And so they cannot afford to have this house of cards go down, because next time Humpty Dumpty falls off the wall, they're not going to be able to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And so at all costs, they just have to keep this expansion going. And I think even Jerome Powell even mentioned something, a few months ago about trying to keep things together at all costs. I know about 8 years ago, Mario Draghi had that famous, whatever it takes at the European Central Bank to try to keep things going. And right now, all the central bankers know that basically that the gig is up, and that the only way to keep things looking normal is to keep printing more and more dollars. And so I don't know if America will actually have the goal to actually go negative in rates. I wouldn't put it past them, because they all pretty much always do the dumbest thing possible. I think that'd be pretty dumb. So yes, maybe they will be doing negative rates, but I think that you'd wait until a Democrat gets in office and then they would go negative, because how are you going to fund? Imagine if Elizabeth Warren gets in. She makes Bernie Sanders seem fiscally responsible. She's talking about, basically it's like whatever Bernie has, we're going to one up that. And it's just, and you called him out too, which is awesome for, taking his honeymoon in the actual USSR, but yet Trump is Russian agent. And here Bernie is taking his honeymoon when it was actually the Soviet Union. And I think he also,
praising them.
He praised Venezuela too in 2011, and Michael Moore was praising Venezuela. And here Venezuela goes from being one of the richest countries in the world in the 90s to now, having, I think, one of the top, Ford F-150 imports,
And suddenly it's not real socialism.
And now I think I saw the other day where an actual Satoshi is actually like one Satoshi, which is like 80.0000, like 8 zeros. One Bitcoin is actually now worth more than one of their, I forgot what their currency is called. Is it
a bolivar?
Yeah, so I think there's about 5 or 6 countries in the world now where one Satoshi is actually worth more than one of their own currency units, which is just an awesome development to see.
Yeah, and it shows how people naturally are moving over to these alternatives to sustain their lives out of desperation. You don't need to convince people of ideology. The technology and the innovation takes its place without people having to be changed or convinced of anything. So I think that's a really interesting point as far as human evolution goes. So closing it off, I appreciate you joining us as always. There's so much to talk about, many more solutions than there are problems, and we go into this all the time, just being responsible and independent and self-sustainable, and food, water, shelter, self-defense, and as well as, gold and silver as wealth insurance, and cryptocurrencies are properly decentralized, fundamentally useful, cryptocurrencies and blockchain infrastructure technology that can actually help you. Most are bad, some are so good that they're changing the world forever. So do your own research, folks, as always. But as we close this off, Tim, how could people find more information on you and support the work that you do?
Yeah, if you guys can head over to thelibertyadvisor.com. I've been running podcasts for about the past 2.5, 3 years. I'm also a financial advisor. So on that tab, particularly if you're interested in cryptocurrencies, I've got some very unique things where you can have crypto inside of your retirement account. Obviously not saying you put, all of it in there, but you can hold on to your private keys. I think that's really a game changer. I don't know any other financial advisor that's able to do that. The other thing is if you got into crypto early, you're sitting on massive gains, maybe you're, 60 years old, have a lot of beneficiaries. There's actually ways that you can legally bypass capital gains using different types of trusts. And so you'll find all that information there. I've got tons of different lead magnets of, top 10 things you need to do before you sell your crypto while you're sitting on massive gains. The top things you need to know when you're looking to get crypto inside of your IRA. And for all intents and purposes, I do like the rest of things financial advisors do as well. But those are two of the unique things where I don't know anyone else that's doing that. But ultimately, we're trying to help people, not only, survive, what's coming, but also, help prosper. And you can check out the podcast where, all this stuff, you can basically fact check me the past three years, and just a lot of stuff I have been pretty accurate on. But I definitely appreciate you bringing me on today. And that's where you guys can find me, thelibertyadvisor.com.
Highly recommended, folks. And while I'm in Europe and reporting on sites around Europe and news around Europe, I'm not going to be able to post as consistently. And of course, Tim and John and others will be filling my space as much as possible when I'm gone, when I'm running around Europe. And anyway, so I'm going to keep busy all the same. We got lots of reports coming at you and lots of great.
I think you also found the only person that talks just as fast as you also.
Yeah. Well, wait. I could employ Ben Shapiro or something. I mean, there's lots of people that talk as fast as us. But anyway, I appreciate you joining us today, Tim. And until next time, thanks for watching, everyone. This is Josh Sigurdson and Tim Picciott signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated as we are so heavily demonetized and shadow banned to a crazy extent. We have lost about 80% of our reach since the beginning of this year as they rip away subscribers, etc. It has gotten out of control and it's becoming more and more difficult to stay alive here on World Alternative Media, bringing you guys free content every day. You can also check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out on all these other alternatives like Subscribestar, where we are doing subscriber only content for people at the $4.99 US a month tier and up. We really appreciate it. You could tip us on there and pledge anything, but from $4.99 and up, we are giving people subscriber only content that you won't find here on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, there are so many alternatives for YouTube these days, including Picciott, which we are on at World Alternative Media, as well as, of course, the new flote.app, flote.app, where they are truly replacing all of these social medias, including Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Tumblr, Reddit, and of course, Twitch and Patreon, all in one place, and it is truly incredible what they are doing. We are moving over there en masse, as well as Picciott, BitTube, Steemit at Josh Sigurdson, all those other places, as well as PocketNet. We are on as well at World Alternative Media. There's so many options today, and we're trying to get into as many of them as possible because we need to back ourselves up. We are winning this information war, but we are getting to a point where they are cracking down more desperately than ever, and we got to do whatever we can to stay alive as it's getting more and more difficult all the time. We also have events coming up, including Anarchadelphia 2019, which will be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in September. Check out thestateofanarchy.com and anarchadelphia.com. Linked below, use promo code WAM, W-A-M, and save 10% on your tickets to this amazing conference as Anarchy is going viral. Also, make sure to check out the Winnipeg Crypto Conference in October. Also, use promo code WAM, another great event with amazing speakers, and of course, Anarchapulco, the one and only, in February 2020, which you can also use promo code WAM for WAM and save 10%. There's so many things that you can do to help independent media, including just pressing like, sharing, clicking the notification button, doing whatever you can to help keep this free information alive that's alternative to the mainstream. Anyway, until next time, thanks for watching, everyone. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.